Play at Novibet.
Hello and a warm welcome to another edition of the Irish Angle in association with Novibet. As usual, Emma Nagle, Johnny Ward are here with me. Emma, Johnny, welcome to the show. Lots to discuss this week, actually.
Thanks, Vincent.
Now, first thing, the big one coming up this Wednesday, 9:35 p.m. on RTE1 TV, is a primetime investigates titled Horses Making a Killing, all about abattoirs and the slaughter of racehorses. We obviously don't know the full content, but there's some little glimpses into it by what they've done with RTE. They've got a little preview to it on YouTube, and they've also got some information on their website. They're saying that they'd tracked thousands of horses that had passed through Ireland's only licensed abattoir, and they found that the majority of them were thoroughbred horses who have raced more than 3,000 times in races in Ireland, the UK and France, and had won $1.5 million in prize money. So obviously we're going to know a few of these horses when the names come out. Emma, this is a bit of a shock again, isn't it? But sure, look, racing, we're used to it. I suppose it follows on. It was only, 3 years ago, Panorama, July 2021, they had their one, which was Dark Side of Racing, which caused such a stink everywhere, including in Ireland, where a number of the Irish trainers were involved in horses that had gone there. This is going to be a mess for the industry going forward, isn't it, after this comes out on Wednesday?
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of stories that no one really likes to hear, and it's kind of hard to comment too much on it now at the moment when we don't really know kind of the full extent of what's going to go into it. I think HRI were approached for comment, and they've spoken to RTE about it, but I don't think there's any real details of whether any trainers or horses in particular will be named, but probably plenty of speculation that there will be probably a few higher profile names shown in there. But look, it's obviously going to be a massive PR blow to the sport. But like, if you can maybe take a positive out of it, maybe it might help to improve, like maybe the aftercare of racehorses. You know, if these things are never really nice to see and that, but you know, if there's any positive to take, maybe the conditions for horses after their life in racing might improve for it. And you know, just the abattoirs, I saw the ad for it. You know, it's probably the responsibility of the Department of Agriculture, I suppose, to ensure the abattoirs are run properly, and maybe we have to accept that a certain amount of horses will go to abattoirs every year, but just to make sure that, you know, once they enter into, you know, before they get euthanized, you know, it's pain free and stress free. It's probably inevitable, although it's kind of hard to, you know, wrap your head around it. People might like to see it, but it is inevitable, and conditions probably in the abattoirs have to improve as well. But yeah, I suppose seeing what's going to come out, it's going to be a hard watch. But I suppose we saw the kind of impact it had in the UK. But they've kind of worked on their aftercare horses after it. And, you know, I think there's different rules. Like in the UK, I think racehorses are signed out of the food chain. Whereas here, that's not the case. I think they're only signed out if they've gotten certain medications or, you know, they have certain medical conditions. So, you know, maybe that's something that will follow on here after it. But I suppose we'll just have to wait and see what comes out.
Yeah. What do you think, Johnny? Is there something that needs to be done here rapidly? Or should we have done something before now? Like, as I say, it's the guts of 3 years since the Panorama documentary, which shone a light on all of this, particularly on the Irish side of it too. And yet there hasn't been a huge amount of change, as you can see, that we now have a primetime investigates from RTE doing something similar 3 years later.
Yeah, like, so obviously, like, just kind of to echo Emma there, in the sense that, like, I don't know what's going to come out in this documentary, but I do feel it's an issue that racing hasn't been very upfront about, to be quite honest with you, because if we're to accept that, as Emma says, some horses are going to end up in an abattoir, we have to accept that as part of the game. If you breed thousands of racehorses, you know, most of them won't be very good or won't race, and what do you do with them then? Now, I was actually on Instagram yesterday, and somebody sent me a photo of Georgie Shore, who was a horse that Gavin Cromwell bought, and then I bought him after Gavin had bought him, but he was only a few grand, and he raced for a year or two. And Susie Barkley got on to me about rehoming horses. I think actually I asked Gavin, and Gavin put me on to Susie Barkley. And the horse has had an unbelievable retirement. Like, he's doing different disciplines in England now, and his owner loves him and all of that. And I have to say, like, I got a great kick out of that, because I'm sure other horses I've been involved with did not have that ending. And sometimes after you've paid money for a horse, and, you know, you've gotten frustrated and you've paid the training fees, and it's really cost you a lot of money, And when the trainer says we're pulling the plug here, being honest, like, you don't necessarily think what's going to happen next. And with Georgie Shore, I changed my attitude to that. I was like, I don't want a horse that's I was involved in, not having a nice kind of ending, if at all possible. And Susie's work at rehome and racehorses is something that I don't think racing has been selling nearly well enough. But like, I'll just refer to an article that Newton Emerson wrote in the Irish Times. Was it last week? He wrote an article about the poultry situation up in the north, Moy Park's poultry processing plant. And he spoke about if you were young from the area of Portadown and you ended up working there for the summer and you saw what went on with the chickens and all that, you would never ever want to work there again. And I do feel that, we have a far bigger issues. We have the meat industry and what happens in the meat industry, particularly in terms of pigs and chickens and how they're reared for us to eat. Racing is nowhere near relevant. But at the same time, this documentary is going to be, it's not going to look good for racing. And we have to be upfront about this, Vinny. If horses are slaughtered after they're not deemed good enough to race, we have to be upfront about that in racing. And it shouldn't be up to prime time to expose it. And as Emma says, we need to look after this area better, because if we're honest about it and say we need to send a horse to the abattoir and it's just a necessary cost of running racehorses, I think racing needs to be more upfront about that and just admit it.
Yeah, I see Horse Racing Ireland. They've released recently a new 5-year plan, and there's some great thoughts about what they're going to do, or aspirations of what they'll do in this area for aftercare for horses. So look, this might spur them on to do a little bit more, spend a bit of money on it, and do it properly is the bottom line. Because look, once and for all, it'd be nice to be finished with this as an issue that keeps popping up. To see it again a second time now, and we don't even know what's coming. Like, God knows how bad this could be during the week, to be honest with you, in the aftermath and the fallout from it. Because I see on Thursday, Horse Racing Ireland and the IHRB are due in front of an Oireachtas committee on finance. But obviously this will trump that. If they go in there, all the different politicians will be wanting to know what the hell is going on with the slaughterhouses and everything else. So, it becomes a major issue for the sport going forward. So it does need to be sorted once and for all, I think. But look, let's see what happens during the week. No doubt we'll be talking about this again next Monday on this show, and we see what comes out of it. One other thing from the weekend of note is Nina Carberry. We know she was going up for the European elections. She's in contention, at least, for a Midlands Northwest seat. It looks like she might pick up the last seat there. What do you make of this, Emma? Is this good for racing, Nina Carberry going into Europe?
I suppose, like, having someone obviously who's so passionate, involved in racing, representing the country at European level, like, can only be positive, you'd imagine, for the sport. And look, I was kind of surprised to see her running first. I didn't really put her down as a politician, I suppose, but it's kind of, she's been so successful in other pursuits, I suppose, after retiring as a jockey. She's definitely a brilliant ambassador for the sport. She's someone you wouldn't mind being the face of racing. It's going to be tough for her. I think you mentioned in your blog, like, this coming out just as she's about to get elected. It's going to be but look, we'll see how she handles it all. And a lot of her campaign has kind of been, I've seen bits on social media. She's big on farmers and racing, and look, like, if we can have that kind of a voice at European level, it can only be positive. And yeah, we should have the best of luck, I suppose.
Yeah, what do you think, Johnny? Will she get in first off?
Yeah, I'm actually, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure of how the voting is working out there. I've been the big story from the elections, local and European, has been, the absolute collapse of Sinn Féin's vote. And we're in a strange situation now, Vinny, where the most popular party really in Ireland is a party that doesn't exist. That's just this large swathe of independents that could be kind of these characters that probably shouldn't be in politics at all, yet are very popular. Left-wing characters, right-wing characters, all this milieu of people. And Nina was kind of one of these, like, celebrity type politicians, like like Emma says there. I had no idea if Emma had or if Nina were interested in politics. But you have to admire, after her career, she's had children. She was one of the best riders, one of the best female riders ever to ride, I think, full stop. And then she's gone on with the TV stuff and Dancing with the Stars and all of that. And then she's gone on to this as well. And like to go out of racing and have this like career, and she's still only a young woman, really is outstanding. And it was a shrewd bit of work, I think, by Fine Gael to get her involved. And it can't do any harm for racing. Like, the election itself was more about, I think, the collapse of Sinn Féin. And I think a party that has been very, very populist, really actually paying the price for that, which is a good thing. And I don't think Nina can do any harm, but you make a good point there, Vinny. Like that Oireachtas hearing, the timing is going to be pretty terrible. For all that, like the references in relation to the Curragh and the money that's been put into the Curragh, that could be quite damaging for racing. This won't help. But having Nina in power in Europe, where the vast majority of MPs wouldn't give a damn about racing, I'm sure it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, the other side of this that I saw, which I don't know how she's going to handle that, because obviously you do need a very thick skin if you're going to be a politician. But I saw one of the videos that she shared on social media last week in the run-up to the election was a promotional piece from Rachel Blackmore saying she recommending people to vote for Nina. But I looked at the comments on it. At one stage over the weekend, there was 115 comments on it, and 114 of them were negative. There was only one saying, well done, Rachel and Nina, hope you get in. The rest of them were all negative in different ways, saying all sorts of stuff about either Nina or Rachel or both or whatever, and saying that they didn't think it was a good thing that Nina was going up for politics in the first place. So there's going to be a huge amount of negative stuff she's going to have to take going forward here, which I don't know. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but then again, you never know.
We have to ask, where is democracy going? Like, when you look at the elections across Europe, the state of politics in the States, and the state of politics, we're not going to be able to elect politicians. And it's like what you're saying. I wouldn't advise anyone to get into politics the way it's gone. And social media needs to be held account for what's going on there, because it's a complete Wild West now, and it's horrific what people have to put up with. Racial stuff if you're an Irish athlete, racial stuff if you're an Indian woman who's going for election in Dublin. All of this horrible stuff, and social media, the social media companies are just getting away with literally are getting away with murder. What's going on online? This has to stop, or nobody will want to get into politics.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on. Best of luck to Nina. See what happens there. We'll know during the week, no doubt. Whatnan Racing. This is another one. Buying horses to run in Royal Ascot. They're spending a fortune. We take it, Emma. The main one being Hatim, Irish Guineas runner-up. That must have cost them a right chunk of money there.
Yeah, there was kind of Diego Diaz was on Nick Luck yesterday, wasn't he? About that filly May Case, and he was offered, was it over 700,000 to buy her? So you'd imagine like the figure for a team will be fairly mouth-watering. It probably will never come out in publicly, but they're newish to racing. I think was last year their first Royal Ascot winner. They had two in Ascot last year, Gregory and what was the other horse? Courage Manami won the Gold Cup. Sorry.
Yes.
And obviously they're trying to boost that team, but like it's a massive positive for racing in Britain. Like I'm pretty sure they're a Qatari-based operation, and like they could have invested this money anywhere worldwide. And just during the week I was looking through the top 10 most valuable races worldwide, and the only European race to feature was the Arc. So if you're spending this kind of money, you could easily go to Japan, you could go to America, you could go to Australia, and be getting a lot more return for your investment. But obviously the prestige of racing in the UK, and it'll probably blow over to Ireland. Hopefully they'll buy a few horses from Ireland as well. It's still the major drawing factor, which is good to see, because we saw comments from Wesley Ward during the week as well on about the prize money in Royal Ascot, how there's maidens in America being won for more, but it kind of shows it doesn't all come down to prize money. And I was actually really surprised when James Doyle left his role with Godolphin to join Watan Racing. But obviously the long-term plan was there, and you can only wish them the best of luck, because it's only going to be really positive for racing to see kind of an operation like that spending these kind of figures.
Yeah, and Johnny, just looking at that, the Diego Diaz 2-year-old filly bought last October for 75,000 sterling at Tattersall's Book 2. What is it, 7 or 8 months later, 9 months later, you're offered 760,000 for the same thing, a tenfold increase on your investment. Would you sell? Would you not? Would you keep her for Royal Ascot yourself?
No, I'd sell. Yeah, yeah. Like I think you need to have a lot of money. I think Emma's laughter and probably tells the story there. I'd sell on the basis that I could do with the money, but also the fact that you have to. You got to be realistic in this game as well. And like the whole economics race now, Vinny, is quite interesting, because like Ger Lyons has gone on the record about this recently. Like, our prize money in Ireland, it actually doesn't look good really at the moment. We've lauded it, and it's half paid for by the government, but in a relative sense, it's not very good. And you have a lot of stakes races now that aren't being run for good money. And as much as they've kind of concentrated keeping the minimum prize money up to what it is, our racing system now is increasingly going to be based on trying to sell horses to abroad. Two lads like Watan and who have like Qatari money. So there's a lot of the Middle Eastern money is almost infinite, really, and that's not the case over in Ireland and Britain. And you have to, as Emma says, like, if this money is filtering into racing over here, we're lucky to get it, because prize money in general is not good in Ireland and Britain. And it's really interesting to see where they go. Having a horse of William Mullins as well is certainly fascinating. And I have to say, I didn't know much about the operation. I was only reading a little bit this week. But to add them into the mix, and must find out a bit more about Richard Brown. It's very, very interesting. But like, ultimately, a lot of the guys at the breeze ups and the guys at the end who are not effectively Coolmore, and those guys who are breeding horses. You need these kind of big operators to be there that you will be able to sell on, because otherwise, like, our prize money isn't going to sustain you very long.
No, I agree. I wrote a bit about that in my blog this week, about the prize money and how low it really is, I suppose, in comparison to other countries. Like, you look at the likes of Japan, Hong Kong, never mind the Middle East stuff, which I didn't even include, Dubai and Saudi Arabia. But like, you're talking telephone numbers, you're talking telephone numbers and prize money in some of those countries compared to here. And one win gets you your whole season covered if you've one win for a horse, whereas it doesn't quite happen that way here. And you can see, that's the thing. A lot of the smaller trainers, as you'd know, Emma, from your side of it as well, a lot of them struggling to get owners, but struggling to keep them then, because if you're not winning prize money, it's very hard to keep them on board, because it's a very expensive sport. Anyway, moving on to the other end of it, the real expensive end of it, City of Troy is going for the Eclipse now, instead of the original target we were told was this Travers Stakes in Saratoga, but it turns out Coolmore have another one to go there, trained by Chad Brown. So City of Troy comes back in trip to 1.25 miles. Is that a good idea, Johnny? Back in trip?
Yeah, like, I couldn't see the Irish Derby happening. And it was a good blog you wrote, Vinny, about the prize money, by the way. I think people really need to wake up to this. On the other end of the scale, City of Troy, I was having a debate with a mate of mine last week. If he went to stud now, what would he go for? And I came up with a figure of about 80 grand, we'll say, because Derby winners generally don't make, they don't make stallions, really. They might make a run of the mill stallion, but most Derby winners, and most stallions themselves are failures. Most Derby winners, won't necessarily be very good stallions. But I did feel, and you saw the way he raced as well, dropping him back to 1.2 miles, to me looks a very logical move. I think Emma, after the Derby, she seemed to be fairly skeptical that they would go to America at this stage, and that's been pretty much proven to be correct. Drop back to the Eclipse, a race that Aidan has a very good record in, including with 3-year-olds. It is disappointing, and Brian O'Connor wrote about this in the Irish Times as well. It is disappointing for the Curragh. But like, ultimately, what would be the point in going to the Curragh? As much as it'd be good for the Curragh at a time that it does need a boost, I don't really see what he'd achieved there. And the problem for the Curragh now, Vinny, is Derby Day. Like, nobody's going to go to the Curragh to see Los Angeles. Like, let's be honest. I mean, he's third in a run-of-the-mill Derby. I don't know if the runner-up, Ambient Friendly, is going, but dropping the horse back to 1.2 miles is going to be interesting. For me, it's like, if he does, say if he wins the Eclipse well, and it's rare for a Coolmore who have a horse that good to even contemplate running him on the dirt. That's when it'll get really interesting, because I know they're probably thinking of his stallion prospects in America if he can handle the dirt, and they can kind of safely say, well, if it doesn't work out, he's European turf horse, and he'll be European stallion. But I'm not at all surprised he's not going for the Irish Derby, but it's not good news for the Curragh at the same time.
Yeah, I'd agree. There was no way he was ever going to go for an Irish Derby. I wouldn't think in real terms nowadays, if a horse does win one of those in English Derby, particularly over the 1.5 miles, that's it. They've done that. They've ticked that box. They need to come back and trip is the bottom line, isn't it? Champion 2-year-old he was as well. I'd say he'd go for a little bit more than 80 grand when he goes to stud. What do you think, Emma?
I'd say he could be a little bit more than that now if he keeps going. I suppose they'll go to the Eclipse, and then will they go to... it's still possible he could still go to that race in America, even if he wins the Eclipse. There's a bit of time between those. But you'd imagine maybe they'll go, like, where did Paddington go, to Jumpmont International or something like that, and then maybe onto the Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, if he was to win all three of those, you'd imagine to be a fairly mouth-watering sum he'd be at stud for. Yeah, look, I thought I would have been surprised if they went straight to America off that. Look, if he had won the Guineas, maybe they would have, but he still has a little bit to prove here. I think, he has to do it again, even though he was so brilliant in the Derby. And I'm sure they probably will give the dirt to Troy towards the end of the season, probably in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but they have Augusta Rodan for that as well, so that'll probably be when it gets interesting, maybe.
Yeah. The other thing we note from just the last few days is Frankie Dettori won't be riding in Royal Ascot. That's a bit of a surprise, is it? Emma, you might have thought he would have ridden there, would you?
I did think he was going to ride there, especially with there's always so many American horses come over. You'd imagine they would have made use of him, and he's going to be in Ascot as well anyway. So I thought it was kind of inevitable that he was, and I think he was he 1-8 to ride at Ascot last year when he announced his retirement. So I'd say everyone was expecting it, but I'm surprised now. I wonder, is he going to get a TV role? Will he be on ITV or something like that? I doubt he's going to be just hanging around for the day for the week, because you'd imagine there'd be plenty of trainers would have wanted to use him, even if he wasn't going to link back up with John Gosling, which were some people were kind of speculating about. I thought he might have ridden Inspiral or something. He had such a good relationship with her last year, but it's probably good for Kieran Schumacher that Gosling has stayed loyal to him, I suppose. I'm not sure, did he have any conversations with Frankie or not? But yeah, surprising. But
I'm priced to ride at Listowel, Emma.
33 to 1 off me for that one.
I'd probably give you 100 to 1 there, yeah.
Don't never be surprised at what Pat Healy can do,
No, I think that bridge was burnt somehow this time last year, but you never know. I suppose I agree. Pat Healy might persuade him, twist his arm in Royal Ascot, and we'll have him over in September.
I might come back in on the city of Troy, right? And it's an interesting debate to have. I think he will go for 100 grand or more as a store, just to come back to it, because I think he'll achieve more between now and the end. But he's not the biggest horse in the world. He's a son of Justify, which doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a guaranteed stallion in terms of sires, at least in a European context. And he did obviously bomb out in the Guineas, which is still a bit of a question mark. So if I'm putting my neck on the line and going to 100 grand at the moment.
What do you mean he's not the biggest horse in the world? Sure, he's 16-1, isn't he? I thought he is the biggest horse in the world.
Yeah. I do. I'd like to get. I think there'd be a great debate on that. Like, what actually makes a racehorse? He doesn't need to be big. Like, he needs to be well proportioned as well. And like, if you saw him as an athlete in Epsom, did you think he wasn't athletic enough to win the Derby? Like, probably we might place too much emphasis on a horse being big and all of that, when a lot of the time big horses don't necessarily get fast horses. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'm going with 100 anyway. Vinny, you can bet over and under and double it up with Frankie going to Listowel.
Yeah, I'd be going over 100. I'd say. I think look, you got to listen to the hype at this stage. I didn't believe before Epsom, but I've got to be a believer now. You got to put on the Aiden cap and say, look, this horse is a star. He's going to produce everything all season long, I'd imagine. So there's some big days to come, whether it's the Eclipse or it's the big one for me is the Breeders' Cup Classic. He wins that, he's worth 200 grand at stud starting off minimum, I'd say. I'd say they'd be lapping him up all over in the States and everything else. What do you think, Emma?
200,000 is a lot first season. I'd probably, if he won the Breeders' Cup Classic, yeah, could they ask it? Would he stand in Ireland or England then? Or sorry, Ireland or America?
In America, I think. Yeah.
Would he stand in America?
I'd say he would. Yeah, if he won
the Classic, would be the big difference. If the Classic would totally change everything, 100%.
Yeah, I'll say 150.
There you go.
That's the guess.
We'll all be proved wrong soon.
What's the prize? Yeah, he'll probably stay in training at 4 now or something.
Now, a horse to follow. Emma, have you got one for me?
Oh God, yeah, my mind's gone blank. Go to Johnny first. Sorry.
All right, Johnny, go on. Give us a horse to follow. You have one.
I'll give one of my. I tipped 4 horses in Navan on Saturday. One of them was the Irish Field Nap, which was beaten. That was the first, and that was 11-8 in the opening maiden. A horse called Red Evolution, who was beaten a neck. The next 3 horses I tipped all found trouble in running. 2 of them were essentially flashed home and were beaten in photos. One of them was third. That was Blue Dream. It was actually a little bit unlucky in running as well. But I'll give my selection to follow as the last horse I tipped. A horse called Cancelled. I don't know what the story behind the horse's name is. It was actually a cheap enough horse by Almanzor, trained by William McCreary, and started off in a Cork maiden won by 6.5. I couldn't believe she was 5-1 on Saturday. I was expecting her to be about 7-4 or something like that. 5-1, very, very, very unlucky, beaten ahead. Now she's run over 1.5 miles and 1.2 miles. I think she's a lovely, lovely middle distance prospect. So I'll give Cancelled as mine to follow.
Good stuff. You ready, Emma, or do you want more
I
time?
know, I am ready. Sorry, my mind went blank. Yeah, it's probably a strange one to give a bumper winner this time of the year, but I thought Colin Murphy's winner in the bumper in Punchestown last night was impressive, and she was really heavily backed as well. I think 25s early on into sixes or something at the off. He was on about putting her away, that she could be one for the winter as well. You know, a very shrewd man as well. He knows when he has a good mare. And I think he said they really, really liked her as well. I don't think it was a bad bumper either. He beat Hannah Smullen, who was riding Fusillin for Arden Elliott. Obviously, she had won the week before as well. So I'd say she could be one to put in the tracker for next winter, maybe.
Very good. Yeah. Talking about jumpers this time of the year, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at them either, but I saw Adrian Keatley had one that won in England. I can't remember the name, but it won over hurdles early in the week. It had won 2 bumpers. Looks a nice little prospect now. Probably didn't beat a whole lot, but the way it won was very impressive. I think it was about 11-10, won last Monday or Tuesday. Anyway, people can look it up. The other one for me is, one I'd like to look at was one you had a bit of word for, Emma, earlier in the week. Last week was Giselle. Ran in Leopardstown on Thursday. 2-year-old filly by Frankel, trained by Aidan O'Brien. It was first time out. Ryan Moore rode her. Got in a bit of trouble, ran very green, and got beaten by a stable companion who was probably very useful too. And the pair of them, I think, are entered in Royal Ascot for some of the fillies races there. But I thought Bedtime Story was the winner. Very well related. It's out of Mecca's Angel, isn't it? Who was a very good sprinter going back a few years ago. So I thought Giselle, Bedtime Story. I think Giselle will probably turn out to be the better of the two long term. That's what I'd imagine anyway. So that's my little one from the week.
That race is extraordinary, Vinny, and I was actually just texting the lads about it. Frankel out of Newspaper of Record is Giselle, and Frankel out of Mecca's Angel was the winner. Like, unbelievable pedigrees in the one race at Leopardstown midweek.
Yeah, it is astonishing, isn't it? It's just the quality of horse we have in Ireland at the moment. So I know you were giving out about it. The Irish weren't doing that well, but I think we have some serious horses, and Royal Ascot will be fun next week. I think there'll be plenty of Irish winners through the week. Emma has already put up a video telling us about 5 of Aidan's that are going to win for starters, and didn't even include Giselle or Bedtime Story. So,
ask him what price City of Troy will go to stud at next time you're talking to him, Emma.
I will.
You have. Yeah. All right. Well, look, thanks for watching. Thanks for contributing, guys. And we'll be back again next week for more of the same. So if you are having a bet, do gamble responsibly and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so. Okay. Bye for now.